Welcome to the Five Phenomenon Podcast. I am your host, Shane Hayes, and coming up on this episode, another crossover episode with host of the American Werewolf in Vancouver movie podcast, Ryan Whitten. We're discussing Southland Tales, the can cut, based from the recently released Blu-ray from Arrow. But first, what did I watch this week? And really, well, there was mainly only one thing I think a ton of people watched this week. The thing the internet has been pushing forever, a hashtag making a movie possible. I'm talking, of course, the Snyder cut of Justice League. And yeah, I'll be honest, I'm a little more afraid of talking about the Snyder cut than I am about Trump on here. I know no one listens to this, but if I were ever to get into Twitter battles or actually get commenters on here. And it's also interesting I'm talking about this on the episode for Southland Tales Can Cut, because it's clear this is like a second dip on a movie that seemed incoherent and recut with a risk-averse mentality to re-explain things and to shorten. And in both these instances, the original iteration, or I guess if the Snyder cut is the original version or the new version, or just the Snyder's what he wanted all along, is a much bolder vision that is significantly better than what we originally got. Sure. That being said, this podcast is known to be a comic book podcast too, and I am a comic book reader, and Zack Snyder, I don't feel like he's a comic book reader. Like, he read Dark Knight Returns. That seems like it's it. I mean, most of these things are based off video games. I mean, his Batman, admittedly, the Ben Affleck Batman through Snyder has been very cool, but cool is the watchword there. It feels like the Batman from the Arkham games. The way he moves, the way he kills people, and just it's so funny, Zack Snyder's vision of the DC universe versus the way the Marvel, the MCU has played out. Because if you go back to the 60s, and I'm sure my frequent co-host Ted Haycraft would really want to expound in detail on this, DC was the imaginative, fun universe, and Marvel was the grounded, lived in, I don't know if you would call it dark, but it certainly had more real world occurrences in it. And everything about Snyder's vision for the DC universe seems like it comes from a video game. The deaths, the digital lack of physicality, the painterliness of every frame, which admittedly, wow, what a great looking movie. And Zack Snyder is some kind of pop artist. I think he takes clear pride in that, and watching the two. But just on a practical level, this obsession with this thing called the nightmare storyline that Zack Snyder he's been pushing into the movies. First off, as far as I know, I don't think there's any comic book iteration of it. The only version I'm familiar with is from the DC Injustice video games, which even in that iteration, there's differences, because everything is based off Lois Lane getting killed, and Superman, the best and brightest of us, the model of a great person with great power, who's mannered and just the brightest and best of us, destroys the earth after Lois Lane is killed. In the Injustice game, it's the Joker kills him, and Superman plunges his fist through Joker's heart. In the Snyder universe, I guess Darkseid kills her at some point. And then it gets into this idea that these Snyder really, the thing that's so much fun to watch about these movies, and Snyder seems to be really having fun with them, is he likes to play with these physical characters fighting and their powers and destroying shit. And the drama around it, it's why people who don't like comic books don't like comic books. It's the stupid simplistic morality, forced drama on to scenarios that aren't, like, look at Batman versus Superman. Just look at that on the page. Batman suddenly hates super. The problem with that movie in both cuts, even if you like the other cuts, the problem with that movie is Batman just suddenly decides that he hates Superman, even though he's supposedly a grounded character who's been hidden for 20 years. And both the cuts hinge on this like irrational motives of a main character who then backs up off of it with the meme worthy Martha moment. And oh man, we're already 5 minutes into this episode, and I am ranting about a comic book movie. It really, I'll say this: it watching this again, it was a great movie. It really was. It was fun to watch. It was bizarre in its choices. It was gorgeous to look at, and all I could think of is that point that Alan Moore keeps making that our comic book movies infantilizing our culture way too much. I leave that to you. And now on with the rest of the episode. I listened to the second episode, your
Oh,
podcast today. How many have you put out?
just two. So just Jeff and Brad are out right now. So it's still pretty new and early, but yeah, things have been crazy lately. And then with the ice storms down in Austin, most of the people I wanted down there were in Austin. And so I had them all lined up for like when the ice storms were happening. So
Right.
now that everything, I know I was just like, I'm just not gonna bother them. So like I'm gonna get things rolling again after this week.
Is the template just you're going to talk to old friends from Austin and other people you meet in the film industry?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get some people up here, but I've got I've got a buddy who's like a graphic designer at like a major restaurant chain now, but he's like the one who introduced me to like Studio Ghibli, and like my little brother is like a national park ranger, so I'm gonna have him on, and we're gonna talk like you know some like Grizzly, the horror movie about a grizzly bear that attacks like all these people in a national park.
Huh.
So it's just gonna be an eclectic like pick of like people who I like have a good rapport with, and
Okay.
just talk movies with them.
So did you? Okay. I wanted to originally I wanted to do this whole episode as a giant Richard Kelly episode, but we kind of scheduled this really fast. And Richard Kelly, I started realizing is someone that I have considered someone because he was such a success in the early to mid aughts, even though Donnie Darko initially did bad at Sundance according to him, which I guess it did, but like it's we I didn't get around to we didn't get around to doing too much. We just mainly dived into Southland Tales. I was going to try to watch the box today and didn't get to it. But did you? I guess if we're going to dive into Southland Tales, did you read the comics?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I knew of them, but I had never read them before, and man, am I glad I did.
Okay. What's funny to me is I bought those comics when they came out, and they came out not all at once. I forget how far apart they came out, but I just when I saw the movie, they didn't click at all. I had no clue what like it just it the short film in front of the theatrical cut helped more, or the prologue in front of the theatrical cut helped more than anything else. I thought. Although, okay, us go into what was your first reaction to Southland Tales? When did you see it?
I think I saw Southland Tales like 2009,
So you didn't see it
and
in a theater.
no, no, I it was like right whenever I was watching a lot of like different like independent films. So I was really like kind of branching out. So like I had just gotten through like all my like Lars von Trier stage,
Okay.
and like I was watching like Blue Valentine, or Another Earth, like anything I could get my hands on. I remember I had a group of friends that we would get together and watch different, movies that were kind of out there, and we got a hold of
Had
South.
you seen Donnie Darko?
I had seen Donnie Darko. Yeah, I mean, I liked Donnie Darko. Like, I owned the DVD whenever I was in high school. Like, it was one of those like early movies that I was like, oh, this is great.
Mm.
But yeah, whenever I saw Southland Tales, I It was like 3 or 4 days later, and I was still thinking about it. Just 'cause I was like,
So initially did you like it?
no. Initially, I didn't.
Were you engrossed in it? Were you paying attention to it?
Yeah, I was just like, I just
But you were thinking about it days later.
yeah, just because, I mean, it was like I was, like, laughing the entire time, and I was like, "I don't know if I'm laughing at or with this movie." And then the way it ended, I was like, I had no idea what was going on.
Okay. Um,
And I was so, like, just confused by the entire storyline because I didn't know about the graphic novels or anything at the time, but I knew that this was something special, like, this was something that was trying to be, like, epic.
did you associate Richard Kelly with like Donnie Darko and that? Did you know of him? Like,
I knew of him, and, like, the story that I knew of him was, Donnie Darko was a hit afterwards, and then Southland Tales came around, and it was just, like, such a disaster, and then he's been kind of trying to pick work since then. But no, I watched I think one of the big reasons I watched Southland Tales originally was because I knew that Richard Kelly was involved with it.
okay, and Donnie Darko was a high school movie for you too. You owned it in high
Yeah.
school. Okay. I would have been early college for me. I guess that's the age difference there. And I just remember being into it and liking it, and then the Mad World song at the end of Donnie Darko, like making it stratospheric for me, and just being really. And he was one of those guys who I admired a lot and probably wanted his career at that time. I liked what he was writing. I liked the idea that he was a very creative writer and considered a creative batshit writer who's going a lot of different directions. His influences always seemed, especially the Philip K. Dick stuff, always struck me. So I was so excited about this movie. The other weird thing is that um, he was such a golden boy for Ain't It Cool and Harry Knowles in early 2000s. Like Harry Knowles in particular really went after his talked about his script Bessie, which I think we'll talk about later too. But he really pushed, and also he pushed the Domino script that ultimately got made by Tony Scott. And when this movie came out, or when it played at Cam, it was a little while after I'd gotten to Austin, and I was a desk intern at Detour Film, which is Richard Linklater's company. And I remember what had happened is um, Linklater had Scanner Darkly coming out, but Fast Food Nation, his adaptation of the nonfiction book, was playing at Cannes. I think it played in competition, so he was gone that week. I remember we were paying attention, and Southland Tales played, and everyone was going through the big premiere, and then it had its really disastrous premiere of the cut that we just watched. And I was looking up Roger Ebert's review in particular, which I think I don't remember exactly what he wrote initially, but and then in his review of the theatrical version, he came back to his original impressions of the Cannes showing, and it was just being booed at Cannes, especially now, is considered. I mean, it can definitely end a movie, but it didn't have the reputation it had in the mid aughts, where like there's so many movies that people have loved that got this badge of honor of being booed at Cannes. Okay, what did you think of the Cannes cut? You watched the Cannes cut this morning, you said, or yesterday?
Yeah, no, I watched it this morning. It explained a whole lot more. Like, and it was only an extra, like, 15 minutes or so?
Well, the trick I'm curious about is I reread the comics right before watching this, and I think in both iterations, the comics and the movie, I think I paid attention more, but I don't know how much the comics helped. But I mean, for me, this version is one of the best examples I can think of a different cut making a completely different and significantly better movie. Like it to me, it's just like I don't know if this is a good example, but on the other side of this camera is my Brazil poster. It's the Love Conquers All cut of Brazil versus the theatrical cut of Brazil. Like, which that's the Love Conquers All one is the studio recut to have this like nonsensical happy ending. This it's weird just because there's like in theory the can cut is so much messier, but at the same time it doesn't try as hard. I get the sense, um, but also it reinstates. So the comic books, there's 3 comic books starting up beforehand. There's book 1 is Two Roads Divide, book 2 is called Fingerprints, and book 3 is called The Mechanicals. And then chapters 4, 5, and 6 are in the movie, and it's Temptation Waits, Memory Gospel, and then Wave of Mutilation after the Pixie song is the last chapter. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if is it just the comics that we read that like I paid attention to better. Is that why?
It's gotta be like there's definitely parts of it.
Because I read the comics before I saw the theatrical cut.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And well, okay. The comics are drawn by a guy named Brett Waddell, who was a comic book guy. I looked him up. I actually have read stuff of him. He did, I guess he credits himself as doing an ultimate issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, and I think I've read almost every issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, and I don't remember the guy. He may have done Ultimate Team Up, but he did a comic called The Surrogates that was later adapted into, I think, a Bruce Willis film, and I have that somewhere. And I think he did a 7 adaptation, but for the most part, he's kind of got, if you're familiar with the Sandman cover artist Dave McKean, he when he pencils stuff, he does not when he does his painting collage, but when he actually pencils stuff, this guy has kind of a, to be blunt, kind of a lazy version of it. Like most of his work is done with colors, and none of the people he draws look like their counterparts. Like
No.
you like the second time around, I knew what I was looking for, so I could kind of see like it's hard, especially nowadays. Maybe not as then it'd be acceptable, but it's hard to fuck up drawing the Rock. Like it's the fucking
Yeah,
Rock.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
how can you make it so that you don't recognize the Rock as quickly? But I guess when I was reading it this time, I knew which characters were playing who and what. So
Well, I'll be honest, like, it'd been so long since I'd seen the theatrical cut that whenever I was reading the comic books, like, there were people in it that I didn't remember who that character was, and so
oh, absolutely. Did you skip? Did your version? Did it have the thing at the end where it had the stills from the movie? I had to jump to
it
those.
did, yeah, so it would have the characters so, but I didn't jump to the end, so I would just read through the whole way, and then at the end, see who was playing that character in the movie, and it was kind of enjoyable for me because it became like a game to me of, I wonder who's playing this
Kind of an
character.
O moment.
Yeah,
Mm.
which, the cast of this movie.
Do you? I got a question for you. Do you think it's a good like it's a very cool cast, the fact that like all these characters come up, but like is it a well cast movie? Not just for the fact of name recognition or you're excited people came in, but do you think it's a well cast movie?
No.
Okay.
Not really.
Okay.
Like, I think, like, this is definitely I think The Rock was well casted.
Uh-huh.
I think that he's, like, that's one of the I mean, that's definitely the boldest character he's ever been.
Yeah, but at the same time it's early in his career. I want to say like I don't know, Rundown's his bigger what it's Scorpion King and Rundown are his biggest movies up to it's 2006. I'm blanking on the timeline, but like for a guy who's like so has chiseled this idea of being charming on screen right now, like he does have maybe even more than like George Clooney right now or Tom Cruise or any of our stars who are just like seem like they're effortlessly charming. He's so good at it right now. And he has this mannerism that he relies on in the movie where he does this like Woody Allen paradiddle where he keeps with his fingers, he keeps putting his fingers together like it, and then he's stiff in some scenes too. But like
Well
it's still The Rock. It's like he's always gonna be watchable. And
well, you know, the whole time that I was watching it, I kept on thinking, like, like, WWE training is still showing in his character.
how
Like,
so?
just like his reactions to things were so over the top, like, especially that opening scene where it was, him and Sean William Scott in the, police car. Like,
Oh,
he asks him a question, and it's just so over the top that I was like, "Oh, man, he's completely in wrestling mode right now."
mm.
Like
he yeah, it's like it alternates between being stiff and then him having an interesting line reading that's like normal Rock. I think one of the biggest issues with this movie is when you're editing a movie, your first act is really hard to nail. Your first act, Billy Wilder famously pointed out that if a third act isn't working, your problem isn't the third act, it's the first act, because the first act is, um, it's your setup. Say you're doing just a basic structure or 2 point structure of setup and punchline. Your first act is what sets everything up. It sets up the characters. Are you going to like the characters? What's the tone of the movie going to be? What is your audience expectations going to be? It's the opening minutes of a movie is where an audience decide if they're going to be paying attention. Like if you fuck up your opening minutes, and it also gives their direction of what they should be paying attention to. And the thing that reading these comics beforehand made me realize was that there's so much exposition, setup, and world building that the comics did that just, I don't know. There's no way that unless you're just thrown to the deep end of the pool. And to be fair, the can cut does it supposedly more than the theatrical cut. I don't remember shit about the theatrical cut for the most part, but it just throws you into the deep end of the pool. And with the comics, I mean, just the concepts the serpentine dream theory, that's barely mentioned in the movie until near the end.
It's the very end where they bring it in. Yeah, there's a whole story. There's a whole through line with the serpentine dream, and like a lot of the biblical references were taken out of like that were in the comics that weren't in the movie that I think would have
Yeah.
helped provide ton of context. Because honestly, if you had asked me or if you had told me that Southland Tales was Richard Kelly's kind of adaptation of the Book of Revelation, I would have never said that. Like,
Yeah.
I know it's been years since I saw it, but I would
Yeah,
never
totally.
have said that.
There's some Jesus stuff and the world ends. That's about it. Where's and oh, the other thing which I don't think I read when I first read the comics, I didn't actually. I kind of I glanced through, and this time I sat down and fully read the first 36 pages of The Power, the screenplay that Sarah Michelle Gellar and The Rock's character write, that supposedly explains it is the Book of Revelations, or it is the thing that's going to bring about the apocalypse. The first 36 pages are in there, and then a lot of that stuff. I guess the reason I skipped it over the first time because I thought it was just like Richard Kelly throwing out a half-assed screenplay that he gave up on 36 pages in. But no, there's recurring theme. Like one point, late in the part 5, this big sequence where Amy Poehler and I forget the actor's name, but the guy that played Aeon Barksdale, they're playing the characters Dream and Dion. Uh, they actually recite dialogue from the script, even though they make a joke about their improving it.
Oh, right. Yeah, that didn't even occur to me,
When
honestly.
Jericho in the early part encounters the mother of in the power script, there's the baby that keeps growing too fast and is supposedly the I don't know, the Antichrist or the Christ figure.
It was supposed to be the Christ figure, but he farts roarous
They make it
thunder.
they make a bigger deal about his farts in that sequence you're talking about where his the Rock's WWE acting comes out, but in the book they make such a bigger deal about he hasn't defecated at all, and then the Sean William Scott character is the same way, and yeah, and I don't know. I think very lazily I thought there was contradictions, and when I was rereading it this time, I kind of found no, it's like Kelly was a good. I think my other frame of mind when I came into Southland Tales is that when the script of Domino came out, I think it was before Southland Tales. It was a disappointment, and everyone had talked that up for years. I hadn't read Bessie, which again we'll talk later. That's something definitely to talk about. But the biggest issue was the director's cut of Donnie Darko. Have you seen the director's cut?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
What's your opinion of the director's cut?
It kind of ruins Donnie Darko.
Okay, thank you.
Um, I have a big theory on both of these, and I don't know if you want me to
Go for it.
kind of
Go into it.
like I believe that like Donnie Darko was a good movie because it was produced well and like they knew how to like cut it down to something that was like palatable. And I think like Donnie Darko wasn't a hit at Sundance and then it was a financial disaster because of 9/11.
Well, it was also I remember when Donnie Darko came out, even before the narrative of it, like being a cult film or being a beloved film, everyone was so their nose was upturned at it being the most expensive movie to come to Sundance. Like it was like a $5 million, $8 million, I can't remember, movie at Sundance, and everyone was like, you know, clutching their pearls about that.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Richard Kelly gets this movie. It doesn't perform, it doesn't do what it's supposed to, and then it becomes a cult hit. And he releases this director cut, which explains all of the stuff that kind of make the movie fun and or like or at least keep it interesting. And so he releases this director's cut that kind of explains things. And I have a theory that he thinks that that's what made the movie a cult hit. And
I
so
think some critics backed you on that. There were definitely critics at the time it came out felt that way.
I think like with what you're seeing from Southland Tales, where you've got the can cut and then you've got the comic books out too, is that he feels like his work just isn't understood, so he's gotta keep on explaining it until people get it, and then it'll be a cult hit.
I've heard that. Because I think the thing that startled me that I thought was so amazing about this can cut is actually like just the filmmaking chops. Just this sense of like this movie looks so much better and felt so much better looking than I remember. To be fair, he keeps to this day saying it's an unfinished film, and never more so on this Blu-ray did it feel like, all right, I see your point. Yes, there are some very, very unfortunate VFX, especially at the end, and it was one of the there was a period post Lord of the Rings where the Lord of the Rings movies were the first release movies that really used digital color timing, and post that, the people really pushed it, and there's some VFX here that look like they were just done in color timing, like that the movie hinges on, that just do not look. They're just unfortunate. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that ice cream truck did not.
I feel I there's a part of me like I can he put his own money into fixing those, or like the compositing like software or the compositing abilities right now is pretty easy for someone at home to do. Could someone else do that
Hey,
now?
I'm sure they could. I mean, look, they just released the Snyder cut today.
Yeah, I think after I'm done recording this, I might try diving into that. As we're
I
recording, it just got re-released. But
I agree with you though. Like seeing the can cut does show that like for as like messy as the movie was, like he had a vision for the entire thing. Like and he knew what the through line was. It just didn't get.
did you watch any of the behind the scenes?
No, I wasn't able to.
Some of the
No.
behind the scenes it's this weird thing where he keeps talking about everyone in pre-production said that they didn't have the budget or the schedule to shoot what they did, and they would shoot super fast and they would get it done. The most notable sequence was the all these things I have done killers basic music video, which even in the theatrical cut I thought was like the highlight of the entire movie, and still always is like it always that yeah that scene is still my favorite in the movie, and they shot it in like super fast. They started after lunch and got it done like really super fast. And then Richard Kelly talks about like everyone's surprised that they got this stuff done super fast. But then when they finished the cut to can, they sold it to Sony. Sony looked at a rough cut. Its executives knew what they were looking at with a rough cut. They knew how to expect, like, oh, this isn't done. This needs work. And then the can reaction killed any momentum of them getting money to finish these effects, apparently. And
Mm.
and yet, even to this day, this movie is now 15 years old, and this is the
Mhm.
15th anniversary of this. We're still seeing the unfinished version of these effects. Like the director is still putting out the unfinished version of this. Like
Yeah.
there's a give and take is what I'm saying. Like you can say like, oh, we can do a lot with a lower budget, but then when you put your name on it and you're like, I stand by it, you just don't get a mulligan. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like the The other thing that was in the behind the scenes that Kelly talked about was this idea that, which made sense, is that his movies need to be seen multiple times, and he wants to make movies that need to be seen multiple times. I get that. That like every film fan likes the movies that they can dive into a little more. But every time I've worked on a movie where we have to debate esoteric merit and or deep meaning that we'll get across, the point I know I always push is that you got to make the movie engaging enough on first viewing so that someone will want to come back to the second and third viewing. And if like, I'll be blunt. So Southland Tales for me, I was talking to some friends about a movie one time, and we were talking about this movie that whether that was going to be a disaster or not. And the friend said, "Oh, do you think this movie's going to be like Heaven's Gate, where I mean, you're familiar with Heaven's Gate, the
The
Chimino?
cult?
No, the
Oh,
movie.
sorry.
There's
No.
a great book by Stephen Bach called Final Cut about the making of Heaven's Gate, supposedly taking down United Artists. It was a giantly expensive movie that like made so little money, and the book discredits that. And the movie has this great history also where it's actually pretty beloved now. Like I love the shit out of the movie, but at the time it was the punching bag that supposedly killed a studio, completely destroyed United Artists. The friend thought this one movie might be Heaven's Gate, and I said, no, that's not the worst case scenario of a movie just because that movie ultimately got somewhat redeemed by history. The worst case scenario is Southland Tales, where it's an incoherent mess that leaves everyone indifferent and no one wants to see it and no one cares about it and no one talks about it. And
Yeah.
what's weird is also in that scenario, this movie Southland Tales starting to turn a little more into Heaven's Gate with the can cut, because this cut makes sense. This cut's better. It's like a lot better.
Well, and it's funny too because I saw somebody talking about where they were saying that like this movie is a movie that would be like is perfect to be dissected by Reddit.
Yes, I saw that same thing too.
And you know, the more you read like the comic books and kind of Richard Kelly saying, "Oh, like it's not done yet." It makes you wonder if it had come out more around now when he could have 15 different social media accounts, blasting out more information about the
If he
movie.
had
If
Snyder Bros on his side.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not even that, but just like they talked about, I guess were there websites for the movie as well that you could go get more information on it, but
There
that's
were
kind of
everyone. There was a period of where people give credit to Blair Witch's website as being one of the big things that like led to that its big epic box office draw, and everyone wanted to do a website like that for a long time. But I think one of the striking things about the movie, though, as much as like watching it 15 years out, it did feel like a great capsule of the Bush years. But it also felt quaint watching a movie about the apocalypse where the internet isn't really a factor or as much a factor, and Facebook doesn't exist or social networks don't exist. Like,
mm.
how quaint is that?
It is, and if you think of, because one of the things that I read about this movie as well is the fact that this movie was the original script was pre 9/11.
Yeah, and he mentioned there was like some heist movie that he kept overwriting.
Yeah, yeah, and then 9/11 happens and he comes back and he makes this about like, and I mean you feel like the anxiety and the kind of confusion of the era that was going on. But I think there's something to be said that like if you go back in history, you can like Richard Kelly is probably one of the most affected by 9/11 filmmakers that
Because
exists.
Donnie Darko came out like the
Well,
Newmarket finally put it out on like a week after 9/11 or the week before.
yeah, and it was about a airplane going down, and then
Oh, right.
so that was a big reason that people didn't go to see it, and then rewrites this to include some of his fears and his like I don't know if you noticed, but one of the things that I thought was funny is there's a recurring theme of characters fighting against contracts. And I
No.
don't know if that's I don't know if that's a specific nod to something that happened to Richard Kelly or if that's just something that, came about.
Well, the obvious thing that is stuck in my craw from the beginning on this movie is that a celebrated filmmaker who couldn't get his next film made, who is noted as a screenwriter on the side, decides to base a movie about revelation inside a screenplay, and it's like only a screenwriter would do that shit. Like not there's a reason I skipped over all those pages in the comic. Just the screen, you know this better than anybody else. Like the screenplay form is the most god-forsaken, and I mean that term in this context. We're talking about a screenplay as being the Book of Revelations, the most god-forsaken format of readability ever. It's just it is. Screenplays are where words go to die. It's the format to appeal to people who don't like to read, who like, or actors who only want to see their lines. That's really, or script supervisors or AD or UPMs to figure out to break down shit and figure out how many days they need and how many the word per minute rule doesn't even really apply to half the scripts anymore. It's just
No.
yeah.
We've lost prose in the white space of scripts these days.
I don't think
Unfortunately.
prose ever was into it though. But
No.
one of the weird fascinating things, I've never read this book, but there's a giant overlap because Richard Kelly, one of the positive things I love about this movie is he keeps talking Philip K. Dick, but there's like this coterie of writers who tended to give you this vibe that anything can happen. They have this really great sense of the macro where life and death could happen all at once, and this universal cosmic view of things. But they're goofy. They're really goofy. And I'm thinking like people like Thomas Pynchon or Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut's also like with the energy stuff and Cat's Cradle. Kelly apparently was going to do writing a version of Cat's Cradle for a while.
You know who was attached to direct that originally?
I know he was writing it. I don't know. And then there was talks of them turning into an FX show for a while.
So Aronofsky was attached to direct that, which would have been pretty interesting. And I kind of feel like Mother is Aronofsky's Southland Tales at this point, like right now. Like I know they're not on the same level, but the fact that like with Aronofsky's like argument for like, because he keeps on trying to explain it and say there's more to it, and so like I think
are you
to
in school that
that
you don't
degree.
like Mother?
No, I love it.
I'll see, because I mean, I love Aronofsky's amazing. I don't, so I think, but you're saying that he's going to keep trying to explain it into
Oblivion. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that because like I saw it in theaters, I really liked it, but I'm worried because every podcast he was on, he was like he just kept explaining it, and I was just like, no.
I mean, I think it's a filmmaking tour de force built on a mixed metaphor is the big problem with that. But I was going to say that he keeps bringing up Philip K. Dick, Richard Kelly does in regard to this. I've never read the entirety of this book, but when I looked at the plot synopsis, there's a shit ton of overlaps between Southland Tales and the Philip K. Dick book, Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said. There's including the Sean William Scott character, Taverner, is named after the main character of the book.
Oh.
And one of my instances when I saw this, I did see this when it finally limped into theaters. I saw it at Regal Arbor in Austin. And I remember if I had anything in my hand, I would have thrown it at the screen. The scene with John Lovitz, his when he shoots Dream and Dion.
Oh,
he actually says at one point, for no reasons, apropos of nothing, "Flow my tears." And I was just like, this is that feeling that Richard Kelly sometimes is just compiling influences or things that like he has a select idea that he's blending together. He's putting into a blender to make a movie. I would have thrown shit at the screen when I saw that. But that being said, this time when that line came up, I wasn't that bugged because in book 3 of the comic book, Taverner, they show him back in Iraq with what's Justin Timberlake's character's name? That
Pilot Abilene.
Yeah, which the book goes into more depth of their relationship. They have that exchange. They both and one says "flow my tears," and the other finishes the sentence says "the policeman said," and
So it's a little more subtle than just throwing it out there.
it's well. Speaking of John Lovitz, the other notable thing you got to a little earlier, you were talking about the cast, the SNL cast here, like, and apparently did a lot of improv. There's a little bit of Mad TV people in here, but the SNL cast, like, just someone actually willing to do that. Like, I felt like you got a net positive with them on it. Like, I asked you the question about the casting because like I don't know if it's a well cast movie, but like I think multiple people have brought up it's a mad world in regard to this movie, and
I didn't put that together, but that makes the entire cast make a lot more sense.
yeah. Well, what's funny is I don't see it in Southland Tales, but it's mentioned at the end of Bessie in the screenplay of Bessie. Like they're watching a
Huh.
scene from "It's a Mad World," and like Southland Tales, like going back to that blender of influences, the big movie they reference is "Kiss Me Deadly," the Robert Aldrich movie, the Mickey Spillane book, the one that has the nuclear bomb at the end and the glowing suitcase that they got for Pulp Fiction.
Mm.
And again, it's a movie within a movie that like I guess informs the movie, but it's also like showing your influences on putting your influences on your sleeve.
Well, didn't they had the exploding nuclear bomb in the background like a few times through that movie, didn't they? It was like in a few different places.
Like, I mean, are you talking about like beyond the obviously the opening scene, but you're talking about like, was there?
I feel like I saw it again, maybe in the neo-Marxist lounge, but maybe I'm misremembering. But I
Was it a
could have
mural or
sworn
something,
I
or
saw
did
it.
you see like a light?
I saw it on a TV, like in the background,
That's
but
I think I think I know what you're talking about. Well, the nuclear explosion in Kiss Me Deadly is just like a very localized one on the beach. To spoiler alert to end the movie, but it comes from the suitcase
yeah.
and then just like blows up a beach house. But yeah. Um, I did. Did you notice in the scene where the neo-Marxists are taken down by the urban pacification units, and there's the little person that comes in there? Did you see who the little person kills on the toilet?
Oh yeah, Eli Roth.
Eli
Yeah,
Roth. This is the
which
movie.
is
Like
great.
Eli Roth was supposedly going to produce a Richard Kelly movie, Corpus Christi, that never got made. But this is a movie that has all these weird director cameos because obviously Kevin Smith playing was it the Dungeon Master, the character who's big in the prequel comics, but like
Yeah, has a huge role, which but now he wasn't in the theatrical cut, right?
no,
Or was
I
he in
think he
it
was.
and he had just had a smaller part?
If
Because
he
I was
was in the
reading,
theatrical cut, wow, I thought he was, but
I I feel like I was reading that I know Janine Garofalo, she was either taken out of the theatrical cut
you
or
know what?
barely in
That
it.
makes sense because one of the things I noticed this time that I hadn't noticed before is the headquarters, the Santa Monica Urban Pacification headquarters, where they're monitoring everything, is called Planet Telex, which is a Radiohead song. And there's one scene in the movie where like that's a Radiohead song that was changed significantly from the studio version to the live version, and the live version's playing in the background whenever Nora Dunn and John Larroquette are having one of their mini scenes together. Their arc, by the
Mm.
way, in this movie is great. Also, I'm so excited. This is the second episode in a row that Nora Dunn has appeared in the movie, and I get to bring her on an episode.
Yeah, his control of music is actually really good.
Really good. I don't know if that was restored in this. Like just everything about this cut, like the feeling of flow, tone, um, his Stephen Poster is the DP on this, and I looked him up because Stephen Poster did obviously a lot of great work on Donnie Darko, but his career is mostly as second unit director on a bunch of bigger movies, and amazing work on this. I mean, in as much as the VFX sometimes don't back him, he's left stranded there, but
Mm.
yeah,
And then, we gotta talk about, Justin Timberlake.
okay,
That was an interesting choice, I thought, and his character was I still don't think I understand his character in the movie.
okay. Even with the comics added to it, they mentioned, I think it's in the can cut. I can't imagine it was in the theatrical cut. They talk about his movie stardom before he went to Iraq.
Like I understand his backstory, but like the jump between him being in the being the drug dealer in the video arcade and then him being the sniper out on the beach as well. Like I was a little just confused on that. Like
I know one line said that seemed to like, I don't know if it makes sense in the real world, but it made sense in context of the movie. Is that you should remember that era, the rah 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 behind everyone, our veterans going to Iraq and supporting your troops, and then the feeling, especially in the years after, that we really didn't support them, especially when they came home from with giant PTSD, or especially at that time when people were getting stop lost and their tours were getting extended. And the line Kelly said was something along the lines of, all those soldiers we sent overseas, all the energy they were putting outwards was suddenly turned inwards back towards America,
mm,
all the enforcement.
hmm.
And I mean, it goes along with that sequence whenever the aforementioned one with the killer song, which with the bug.
Which I'm with you. It like doesn't really seem to fit with the rest of the movie, but it's a great like.
It fit for me. It fit better in the movie this time, just because it was
Okay.
about like veterans like being like told to. I mean, just the amount he's drinking in that scene. I thought the drinking was a weird affect in the theatrical cut. In this one, it was just like, drink your PTSD away. Like like really helping veterans when they come back, as opposed to just like supporting your troop as long as they're doing the work. That stuff. It just
Yeah.
and throwing into their wolves of their psychology. Like the theatrical, this can cut really gave me the sense that like going, especially the things I thought that even if Richard Kelly doesn't entirely, it just instinctually did in Donnie Darko. And we didn't talk much about the box just because I wasn't able to watch it, but there's stuff in the box that like really work. Kelly's really good at pathos, like just like, and these like, they don't entirely make sense, but these moments of catharsis, like and I'm not sure, like on an instinctual it's all instinctual for him. I'm not sure on an intellectual level it work, or he could probably explain it, especially whenever in terms of things like the Donnie Darko director's cut, or the theatrical cut of Southland Tales that needs to explain, it has better clarity. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think he's a guy. I mean, like you said, he has these brilliant moments, and that's what keeps Southland Tales together. Like especially the can cut, because like for all intents and purposes, this is kind of a goofy movie. Like it,
Oh God. He had this line where he said he writes comedy when he's feeling more anxious about stuff, and like there's so much more comedy in this. And it's weird just because it's also the dated stuff, and like some of the stuff, it's like that exhibitionist thing that he's writing these lines for to appeal to people in the early aughts. There's the media obsession, the porn star stuff, all the Kristen Now
but
stuff feels along those lines, the reality TV stuff.
well, and I don't know if you noticed, but I there's got to be somebody out there that knows exactly how many times you see the number 69 in the background of this movie. Like it was
I
everywhere.
didn't notice it. I mean, I wasn't looking for it, but I don't think I noticed it.
Oh man, it's all over the place, all over the wall, and I'm sure it has a reference back to synergy and fighting against each other. Like, but
It's his version of a yin yang.
yeah, exactly. But it's just was hilarious to me. Like even they're on the beach and like the guy who's carrying one of them away like has just like 69 written on his back, and I was just like, it gave me a good chuckle.
That makes sense. I always think of the scene in the opening of Magnolia where the Bible passage about the frogs gets planted in the side of the building, and it was just a gag they were bored on set and they decided to do, but it's hidden in there, but you could totally see it. Speaking of the datedness of this, is this where we want to talk about Bessie?
Yeah, let's do it.
You did read it.
Yeah.
What'd you think? I was my first time reading it.
It's really interesting. Like I hadn't. So that was the first. I hadn't read Domino before or anything like that. But man, it's just so out there.
Did you see Domino?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. I remember because I think a lot of the thing with Domino is like all the out there stuff. I don't know if I don't think I've ever read it, but like it just didn't. It's there, but it's also Tony Scott at the time was already out there. This stuff, in fact, one of the things that struck me about Bessie is for out there as it is, it's pretty coherent for about the first 3/4 of it. Like,
Yeah.
my big issue with Bessie was there's a big twist about 3/4 of the way through when they show Bessie the video that like derails the movie. But up until that point, I thought, yeah, it was so coherent and it was such a streamlined thing. Because one of the issues that keeps being brought up with people talking about Southland Tales, and Richard Kelly will admit this himself, is that whenever there's a problem where they need to rework the script, he adds more. And and it's an instinct I understand. Like, I get it. Like, anyone who's heard me talk on this podcast understands I'll just throw words on shit. Like, I will over explain stuff. I get it. But in movies, most of the time you want an idea as simple as possible to get across. You want something as uncomplicated and as pure and musical and just not thinking through something you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you throw more onto it, intellectualize it, like,
well, and it does go back to you're like, that's the age old adage of show don't tell for a screenplay. And like the thing is like I think Richard Kelly is a good screenwriter. Like I think
Bessie made it abundantly clear he's a great screenwriter. And
I think he's a great screenwriter who understands structure very well.
You know, it's funny you use that word structure because like him being the like I kind of reread some of Harry Knowles' original review of Bessie in prompt to that, and it reminded me back of that early reading Ain't It Cool news in the early 2000s where they were so all over Charlie Kaufman at the time, who feels like a contemporary of Kelly of their careers they could be, and they just both went in different directions. And Kelly, one of the things that haunts me about watching Southland Tales destroyed my estimation of Richard Kelly for years. I didn't really have faith into him. Even with the box, like I thought it was good, but like I thought this guy was an incoherent filmmaker who only made good movies despite himself. And like seeing this again, seeing him as a coherent creator, just like, did that canned reaction, did the journalists in that room destroy a great filmmaker who could have made some great stuff beyond this point? Kevin Smith in particular points out that like Richard Kelly would be a Christopher Nolan level filmmaker if he just got studio assistants. And there's a certain wave of filmmakers' careers that if you lose confidence at a certain point, then like maybe they can't maintain it. But if those journalists in the room had gotten behind it, had seen a rough cut with rough special effects, Sony then in this alternate timeline puts money behind Southland Tales. They commit to the canned cut. They commit to the near 3-hour length. They finish the effects. The whole Hindenburg stuff at the end with the bazooka and the van growing actually looks good. All that stuff at the end. Would we have had some crazy, amazing, batshit, emotionally great, creative Richard Kelly movies throughout the year?
I think there's an argument that yes. I mean, like, you even look at like the script for Domino, and there's lists out there where I forgot who the studio that or the agency that had him. They would constantly send that out as like one of their,
because the Harry Knowles thing mentions the CAA red folder.
Yeah, and so they would send that out as like an example of like a great spec script or like a great script from their agency.
That makes sense just because like, I think even if Bessie's probably never going to get made, especially in this version, but it's a fun read. That's one of those examples of like a script format actually being fun to read. And you get to picture your own movie, especially a movie that abstract and that tonally all over the place. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because the other movie I kept thinking of was the Charlie Kaufman, early Charlie Kaufman script, Human Nature, which was, I think, Michel Gondry's first feature. And, Michel Gondry ultimately nailed Charlie Kaufman and they made an amazing version together. But Human Nature, not some, I mean, it's just kind of goofy,
Yeah, yeah. Uh, eh, there are, and that's the thing is, I think Richard Kelly, like you said, he writes really well, and like it's an enjoyable script. It's not something that you have to see the movie for to enjoy either.
Yeah.
Like, and there's only a few screenplays that out there that are like that, and that's maybe why he was able to get in the room with Donnie Darko,
Hmm.
and Southland Tales happened, but it'd be interesting to read that first Southland Tales cut and just see how different it
First
is.
draft,
Yeah,
you mean
have you?
the Ocean's
Yeah.
11 draft. But
Mm.
well, he's been saying recently that he's compiling a bunch of scripts that he wants to put out. And he is consistently writing and reading Bessie. Like, I mean, even though I want to point out dated stuff, like there's a talk to the hand joke in there, and at one point at the end, Bessie says that she's going to get medieval on people's asses. Even for all the dated stuff, like his pulse is on, his finger is on a pulse. 22 years, and it still
Mm.
feels not that dated. And he was really young when he was writing that, and I wonder if like he still has his finger on that. But I want to read what he's writing now, and like especially if like is there any possibility that he has like he's not being second guessed by people. He's writing confident stuff. Man, like if he had resources, I want to see what he makes. I want to see. I don't know. Like, I mean, there's so many amazing filmmakers right now that need money and resources. I get that, but I want to see what Richard Kelly would have done, and I kind of want to see what he's writing right now.
And another thing is too is like this would have worked out great for like a series.
I got the vibe hearing him talk that he's one of those I need to admirable people who are sticking to cinema. They're just like, I want to make big, high concept ideas that are adult and intellectually stimulating, also goofy as shit, in a movie theater. But clearly, it goes back to what you were saying about the Reddit stuff. Like every Reddit series, like we just got through culturally talking about WandaVision on Reddit forever until the last episode came up. So whatever Richard Kelly wants to do, he could make it work.
Yeah, but I mean, if he's wanting to stick to feature films and stick to the cinema, like
More power to him.
gotta applaud him
Yeah.
for that too. Yeah, and like I wonder if Bessie's one of those things where he just wrote it so early that he knows that, or he like thinks that he can do better. Or what is the story about like him not making it? Is it just too difficult to?
I think it was a spec. I think it was a movie designed as a spec as a writing sample.
Mm.
I think. I mean, like it did the trick. I mean,
Yeah.
like in that review, because Harry Knowles went out to L.A. to talk to him, and when Richard Kelly handed it over to him, he called it his, I want to say, romantic comedy or his romance. And like,
Mm.
I get it. The romance is like the rebar going through the movie until about 3/4 of the way through, and then suddenly it's abandoned in the last act. I
Mm.
get it. Or romance ish. It's more like a sex story between an old couple as like the
Mm.
inching going through the movie. But I did want to talk about most of Richard Kelly's movies end up having to do with the apocalypse, and like I think all three of his movies have to do with the world ending in one way or another.
Mm.
And there's always a tone of suicidal ideation I found in it and release of that in there. Am I misreading that or?
No, because I was actually thinking that while I was watching this cut, because there's the famous rock line, "Pimps don't commit suicide."
Yes, that
Which
he takes so much pride in it. This also goes into that line that is both in the I think in the first graphic novel, in the movie, and if you go to Richard Kelly's Twitter headline, is in the head is his banner of Twitter, which is scientists say that the future is going to be way more futuristic than originally predicted. which he's clearly so proud of that line, and I don't feel that line. I get it. It's fine.
Well, it's funny because like you watch this and you hear those like just ridiculous out there lines, and it's almost like he's trying to make a meme out of like these like one-liners that he puts in these
But
movies.
he's
It's
doing
really crazy.
he's doing a meme. What, like 10 years before the internet made it popular, but like 20 years after Richard Dawkins made the term. Like, nah, good
Uh,
for him. Like, they're just, it's nihilism. It's people giving up. We didn't even, like, I wish I had been able to watch the box, because it goes into my pet theory that, like, structurally it's very, very similar to Donnie Darko, including like a character just basically giving up at the end and giving it and sacrificing themselves via suicide to save the world. Although,
mm,
again, I don't remember much about the box, so I can't comment on the box. I remember more detailed of like having an amazing, amazing score. It has Win Butler and I think Owen Pallett doing a riff on Bernard Herrmann, but also doing kind of like the Penderecki atonalities, and like, but at the same time doing it in that like orchestras, like saying being atonal and like really affecting audiences in a really cool way. But
mm.
did you have any final thoughts on this, on the movie, on the can cut, Ryan?
Should we go ahead and do our final thoughts, or like, would we recommend
Yeah. Oh my
somebody else
God, would I
to watch it?
recommend this? The can cut? Holy shit.
Yeah.
I think the big question I have really is, do you need to read the 3 books? And I think actually, sorry, I didn't even go into the big issue I wanted to dive down. A lot of times when you make something that's kind of, or you work on something that's very thematically trying or abstract, the question is, how far are you having the audience meet the filmmaker halfway or the creator halfway? Because that is the sweet spot. Like,
Mm.
are you meeting the audience more than halfway? Because then you're pandering to them. Are you meeting them less than halfway? Well, you're asking the audience to do more work. And the thing is, if you get an audience member in any medium to do more work, they're going to love something more. Like, there's a great line that I keep trying to find who attributed it. I can't find the actual quote, but it's usually talked about in terms of like books like Gravity's Rainbow or Infinite Jest or Ulysses. But this idea that a great book, and this can apply to a movie, but a great book teaches you how to read it. And especially if something's doing something different with its language or its form, it teaches you how to read that form and see something new that you wouldn't have seen before. And we both read 3 comic books, like lengthy comic books, in preparation for a movie we've both seen twice now in different iterations. And I read the comics for my second time, and it led to for me at least, a really good viewing. Like, I think this is just real. I'll reiterate. I think this is the best improvement of a different cut I've seen since the Brazil Love Conquers All cut. So it was worth it. I don't know, for the average person, if someone's going to come off the street, watch the theatrical or watch the can cut, like, because the other thing about the, like, when you watch the can cut and it starts the 4, 5, 6, there's the pulp tradition of a serial thing that Star Wars did, and but it goes into a different pulp version where it's more into like the second or third wave sci-fi writers that were doing this. Like, there's a tradition. It's interesting, but I guess your question is, can you ask someone to come off the street and watch the can cut and like this?
I think you can come off the street and watch this and enjoy it, but I do think that if you read the comics beforehand, you're gonna get a different experience out of it. Like, I think you're gonna get a more enjoyable experience out of the viewing to go ahead and read those comic books beforehand.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's necessarily unenjoyable by itself. But also, I can't say that because I didn't watch the can cut
I
without the extra, information. So,
I'm gonna have to leave it where, like, I just can't say one way or the other. Like, I think that for people that want to argue that the Donnie Darko's director's cut is an over explanation of what emotionally worked for people on the theatrical cut, The can cut works similarly. The can cut is something that feels like it will work emotionally. I don't know concretely. Like both of us didn't do that, and we didn't A/B this to figure out whether that was the case or not. So I don't know, but I would say that if you're going to read it's a rich world, and so you're going to want to really dive in, and you want to read the comics and really read the comics. I mean, it's a 6-part saga where you're going to start halfway through, and not like the Star Wars movies where you can just watch episode 4 of the Star Wars movies and you're good. Like you don't need to watch any of the other ones. Like you can, and it's a much more richer experience. But yeah.
Now, I think if I had to say, if you if you were like, should I just never read the comics or should I read the comics beforehand? I would say you should go ahead and check out the comics before you watch the movie, just because, I mean, as much as I like this movie, like this viewing of it, I don't know how many rewatches I'm gonna get in in 1 year.
I will,
You know,
I will say I am probably going to rewatch this as a point. Before I saw the can cut, before the Arrow cut re-release this Blu-ray, I was content to never see Southland Tales ever again. And now after seeing the can cut, I will probably watch again. I hope one day Kelly does get back to finish those effects and make a finished movie, hopefully with not these weird chapter intertitles where he has a Bible verse or explanation of stuff a la the Donnie Darko director's cut. But
legitimately, I hope we do get to see, hopefully what comes out of this release is that we get to see Richard Kelly build up some confidence and do something again. Because how long has it been since the box came out? Is that
I think it's
11
2008.
years now?
Yeah. No. It's 13, I think. And
13?
I think the hope of the podcasts like this and the re-release and everything is not just that he gets the confidence, investors get confidence in him to take one of these scripts and make something.
Yeah, and I mean, luckily we're in a time now that, there's distributors and studios are taking a chance, giving directors a second chance, or so hopefully somebody does. I could see him doing something at Blumhouse, honestly.
I don't anymore. I think his low budget days are behind him, but I mean, because I can't imagine that he hasn't had the opportunity or someone's asked him at this point. But
probably.
I mean, he's I don't know, but I don't know. So, Ryan Whitten, thank you for being on the podcast.
Shane Hazen, thank you for joining. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for joining me on mine. We're doing a cross collaboration.
Yeah.